Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The waves crashed against the shore with a relentless fury, as if the ocean itself was lashing out at the humans who stood upon its edge. The sky above was a murky gray, heavy with the weight of an impending storm, while the distant horizon disappeared into the misty veil of rain that had already begun to fall far out at sea. President Davis stood on the balcony of his coastal residence, staring out at the churning waters. His heart was heavy, burdened by the knowledge that the conflict between humanity and the sea people was spiraling out of control. For decades, tensions had simmered beneath the surface, the once peaceful coexistence between land and sea now a distant memory. The sea people, descendants of the ancient god Poseidon, had grown more reclusive, withdrawing deeper into their oceanic realms, while humanity, driven by its insatiable thirst for resources, continued to encroach upon their territory. What began as small skirmishes had escalated into full-blown battles, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. But now, the situation had reached a breaking point. An underwater earthquake, one that scientists insisted was caused by natural tectonic shifts, had devastated several of the sea people's cities, causing widespread destruction. The sea people, however, believed the humans were responsible, accusing them of triggering the quake through reckless drilling and underwater mining operations. In retaliation, they had launched a series of coordinated attacks on human coastal settlements, leaving entire towns in ruins and the death toll climbing by the day. Davis clenched the railing, feeling the cold metal bite into his palms. He was a man of peace, not war, and the thought of leading his people into a conflict that could destroy both civilizations made his stomach churn. Yet his advisors, particularly General Lewis, were pushing for a military response. They wanted to strike back, to show the sea people that humanity would not be cowed by their attacks. But Davis knew that any retaliation would only lead to further bloodshed, to a war neither side could win. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Davis turned to see his chief advisor, Sarah Lyman, standing in the doorway, her face grim. "Mr. President," she said, her voice low, "we've received word from the sea people. Queen Nera has agreed to meet." Davis nodded, the weight of the moment settling over him like a shroud. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. The chance to end the conflict before it escalated beyond control. But the price of peace would be high, perhaps higher than anyone could imagine. "I'll be ready shortly," he replied, turning back to the sea. He had made his decision days ago, after poring over ancient texts and consulting the few scholars who still understood the myths and legends surrounding Poseidon and his descendants. The only way to secure lasting peace was to make a pact with the god of the sea himself, a pact that would require great sacrifice. Davis had already resigned himself to the fact that it would be his life that sealed the deal. The world would mourn him, but it would also remember him, not as a warmonger, but as the man who had saved humanity from destruction. He left the balcony, walking through the spacious halls of his residence, the echo of his footsteps the only sound in the empty rooms. The corridors, lined with portraits of past presidents and leaders, felt like a gallery of ghosts. Davis had always respected the weight of history, but now he would become a part of it, his name etched into the annals of time. Sarah followed him as they made their way to the command center, where General Lewis and the other members of the advisory council were already waiting. The room buzzed with nervous energy, maps and data streams displayed on the walls, showing the extent of the damage on both sides. "Mr. President," General Lewis greeted him, his face hard and determined. "Are you sure about this?" "We still have options. The military is ready to move." Davis shook his head. "No, General. We've already lost too many lives. The sea people have suffered just as much as we have. If we escalate this any further, there will be nothing left to fight for." Lewis frowned, clearly not convinced, but he said nothing more. Davis knew the general respected his authority, even if he didn't agree with his decisions. That was enough for now. "The sea people have requested that the meeting take place in their capital," Sarah said, pulling up a holographic map of the ocean floor. "It's deep in the Marianas Trench, far beyond the reach of our submarines or technology." Davis studied the map. The capital of the Sea People, an ancient city built in the depths of the ocean, was a place few humans had ever seen. Those who had ventured too close had either never returned or brought back only vague stories of shimmering towers and luminescent creatures that swam through the dark waters like ghosts. "I'll need a small team to accompany me," Davis said. "General, you'll be with me, as will Dr. Elena Marcus. She's our expert on underwater ecosystems and the ancient myths surrounding Poseidon. Her knowledge will be invaluable." General Lewis nodded, though Davis could see the unease in his eyes. The journey to the Sea People's capital would be dangerous, but it was the only way. "Are you sure you want to do this personally, sir?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with concern. "You could send a representative. It doesn't have to be you." Davis met her gaze. "It does. This is my responsibility. I started the talks, and I will finish them." There was nothing more to say. The decision had been made. The preparations for the journey were swift. Within hours, Davis, General Lewis, and Dr. Marcus were aboard a specially designed submersible, descending into the deep, dark waters of the Marianas Trench. The silence inside the vessel was palpable, the hum of the engines the only sound as they ventured deeper into the abyss. Outside, the ocean was a black void, occasionally illuminated by the eerie glow of bioluminescent creatures that drifted past like specters. As they descended, Davis couldn't help but feel the weight of history pressing down on him. For centuries, the oceans had been a place of mystery and fear for humanity. Now, he was about to confront the very source of that fear, the ancient god who ruled these waters and the people who had long called the sea their home. Dr. Marcus broke the silence, her voice soft but clear. "The Sea People's capital is said to be one of the oldest cities in the world, built long before humans walked the earth. According to legend, Poseidon himself raised it from the ocean floor as a gift to his people." Davis glanced at her. "And now it's a battleground." She nodded, her expression grim. "The Sea People have always been protective of their territory. They believe the ocean is sacred, a gift from the gods that humans have no right to exploit. That's why they've resisted us for so long." "And Poseidon?" General Lewis asked, his voice skeptical. "Do you really believe we're about to meet an actual god?" Dr. Marcus hesitated, then shrugged. "I don't know. The stories are ancient, passed down through generations. But the Sea People believe in him, and that's all that matters." Davis didn't care if Poseidon was a god or a myth. What mattered was that the Sea People believed in him, and if making a pact with their god was the only way to bring peace, then so be it. The submersible continued its descent, the pressure outside growing as the ocean deepened. After what felt like hours, the blackness of the deep ocean began to give way to a faint, ethereal light. Davis leaned forward, peering through the thick glass of the viewport. "We're close," Dr. Marcus said, her voice filled with awe. The city of the Sea People emerged from the darkness like a dream. Towering spires of coral and stone rose from the ocean floor, glowing with a soft, bioluminescent light. Schools of fish and other sea creatures swam through the streets, their scales shimmering in the dim glow. It was beautiful, in a strange, otherworldly way, and Davis couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder as he took it all in. The submersible slowed as they approached the city's central plaza, where a group of sea people awaited them. At the forefront was Queen Neera, her regal form towering over the others. Her skin was a deep blue, her eyes glowing with the same light that illuminated the city around her. She wore a crown of coral and pearls, and her expression was unreadable as she watched the humans disembark. "President Davis," she said, her voice carrying through the water with an almost musical quality. "You are brave to come here." Davis stepped forward, meeting her gaze. "I come in peace, Your Majesty. I seek an end to the conflict between our people." Queen Neera regarded him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "The only end to this conflict is through Poseidon's will. Are you prepared to face him?" "I am," Davis replied, his voice steady. The Queen nodded, her gaze lingering on him for a moment longer before she turned and gestured for him to follow. Then come, the sea god awaits. President Davis followed Queen Nera deeper into the city, the soft glow of the coral towers casting long, ethereal shadows over the ocean floor. The sea people around them moved gracefully through the water, their bodies seemingly at one with the currents. Davis felt out of place in his bulky suit, the pressure of the deep weighing heavily on him, but he kept his gaze steady, his mind focused. Every step he took felt like he was moving toward a moment that would define the future of both their worlds. Dr. Marcus and General Lewis followed closely behind, their faces masks of cautious intrigue. Neither had spoken since they had left the submersible, but Davis could sense their unease. This was a world they did not understand, and their presence here felt like an intrusion into something sacred. The path ahead led to an enormous, open chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings and symbols that seemed to pulse faintly with life. At the center of the chamber was a massive, circular pool, the water within it shimmering with an otherworldly light. Davis's heart skipped a beat. This was the heart of the Sea People's world, the place where their god resided. Poseidon. Queen Nera stopped at the edge of the pool and turned to face Davis, her gaze intense. Beyond this water lies the realm of Poseidon. No human has entered here and lived. The god of the sea is not one to forgive easily, especially after the harm your people have caused. Davis stepped forward, his resolve unshaken. I understand. But I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to offer my life in exchange for peace. Dr. Marcus gasped softly behind him, and General Lewis shifted uneasily, but Davis did not waver. This was the moment he had prepared for, the moment where his sacrifice would end the war, end the suffering. Queen Nera studied him for a long moment, then inclined her head. Very well. If you are truly willing to offer your life, Poseidon may listen. But understand this, the pact you seek to make will bind not only your soul, but the fate of all who live on land and sea. Davis nodded, his heart pounding. He had known from the beginning that the price of peace would be steep, but this was a burden he was ready to bear. He had no family, no one to leave behind. His only legacy would be the peace he secured. Queen Nera stepped aside, allowing Davis to approach the pool. The water shimmered, glowing more brightly as he neared. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in his mind. Was this really the right choice? But he pushed the thought aside. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Davis stepped into the water. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. The water was cool, but not cold, and it seemed to pull him in, wrapping around him like an embrace. He could feel it seeping through his skin, sinking into his very bones. The light from the pool grew brighter, blinding him, and then everything went dark. For a moment, there was nothing and no sound, no light, no sense of time. Davis floated in the void, his mind detached from his body, as if he were suspended in the depths of the ocean itself. And then, slowly, a presence began to form around him. It was vast, ancient, and powerful beyond anything he had ever imagined. Poseidon. The sea god's voice rumbled through the darkness, deep and resonant, like the roar of the ocean in the midst of a storm. Mortal, the voice boomed, you dare to enter my realm? Davis swallowed, his throat dry despite the water surrounding him. I come to seek peace, he said, his voice steady despite the terror that gripped him. I offer my life in exchange for an end to the war between our people. The darkness seemed to swirl around him, the weight of Poseidon's presence growing heavier. Peace? The god thundered. Your kind has ravaged the seas for centuries, plundering its depths, polluting its waters, and now you come to me, expecting peace? Davis clenched his fists. I know my people have made mistakes, but we can change. I can change things. If you allow me to make this sacrifice, I can ensure that humanity and the sea people live in harmony. For a long moment, there was only silence. The weight of the god's presence pressed down on him, suffocating, as if the very ocean were trying to crush him. But Davis did not falter. He stood his ground, knowing that this was his only chance. Finally, Poseidon's voice rumbled through the darkness again, quieter now, but no less powerful. "Your courage is admirable, mortal," the god said. "But courage alone will not save you." The darkness began to shift, and Davis found himself standing in the midst of a vast, underwater landscape. Towering coral structures rose around him, and the water was alive with creatures both beautiful and terrifying. At the center of it all was Poseidon, a figure of immense power, his form shifting between that of a man and a creature of the deep. "If you wish to make this pact, you must prove your worth," Poseidon said, his voice echoing through the waters. "You must face the trials of the sea, and only then will I consider your request." Davis felt a surge of fear, but he nodded. "I will do whatever it takes." Poseidon raised his hand, and the water around Davis began to churn violently. The coral structures twisted and bent, forming a labyrinth of sharp, jagged edges. The sea creatures that had once swum peacefully now turned their eyes on him, their teeth bared and their fins slicing through the water like knives. "Survive," Poseidon commanded, and the trial began. The creatures lunged at him, their jaws snapping and their bodies moving with an unnatural speed. Davis barely had time to react as he dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding a pair of razor-sharp teeth. His heart raced, his mind scrambling to find a way out of the labyrinth, but the walls seemed to close in on him, trapping him in a maze of danger. He fought to stay calm, to keep his wits about him. This was a test of his resolve, of his ability to survive in a world that was not his own. He had faced many challenges in his life, but nothing like this. The sea was an alien environment, its rules and dangers unknown to him. But he could not fail. He would not fail. Davis started through the maze, his movements clumsy but determined. He used the coral structures to his advantage, weaving through the narrow gaps and avoiding the worst of the attacks. His lungs burned as the pressure of the deep pressed down on him, but he refused to give up. The creatures continued their relentless assault, but Davis fought back with everything he had. He grabbed a broken piece of coral and used it as a makeshift weapon, striking at the creatures when they came too close. His body ached, his vision blurred, but still, he pressed on. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the attack stopped. Davis found himself standing in an open space, the labyrinth gone, the creatures vanished. The water around him was calm once more, and Poseidon stood before him, his gaze unreadable. "You have survived," the sea god said, his voice carrying a note of surprise. Few mortals would have had the strength to endure the trials of the sea. Davis was panting, his body battered and bruised, but he stood tall. "I told you, I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Poseidon studied him for a long moment, his eyes glowing with the light of the deep. "Very well," the god said at last. "You have proven your worth, mortal. The pact you seek will be made, but the price remains the same." Davis nodded. "I understand." Poseidon raised his hand, and the water around Davis began to swirl once more. This time, it was not violent, but gentle, almost soothing. The light from the pool glowed brighter, and Davis felt a warmth spreading through his body. He knew this was the end. His life would be the price for peace, and he accepted it willingly. As the light enveloped him, Davis thought of the future. He thought of the world he was leaving behind, a world that would finally know peace between the land and the sea. His sacrifice would not be in vain. And then, with a final breath, he let go. The water stilled, and the chamber was silent once more. Queen Near stood at the edge of the pool, her gaze fixed on the still surface. She did not speak, but her expression was one of deep reverence. The pact had been made. The war was over. Far above, on the surface of the land, humanity would soon learn of President Davis's sacrifice. They would mourn him, but they would also celebrate the peace he had secured, a peace that would last for generations to come.